Right now, on the Gulf Coast, some properties are selling in days while others sit for months collecting dust and price cuts. The gap between what's moving and what's sitting has nothing to do with luck. I walked through a terminal illness, bedridden for 3 years, and it completely changed the way I see fear, decisions, and people. The perspective shift carries into real estate because buying and selling are never just about the numbers. They're about the emotions underneath: hesitation, attachment, denial, hope. And in this market, emotional decisions are costing sellers real money while buyers walk away from properties they can't connect with. So today, I want to show you exactly what separates Gulf Coast properties that sell from the ones that sit, and why the difference is almost never what sellers think it is. Most sellers think their biggest risk is pricing too low and leaving money on the table, but the actual biggest risk is pricing too high and watching the market punish you for it every single day the listing sits. I see this pattern over and over again. A seller lists at what their neighbor got in 2022 or 21 and refusing to accept that the market has shifted. We'll just test it and see, they say. But here's what actually happens. The first 30 days are everything. That's when the most motivated buyers are watching. When you overprice in those critical first 30 days, you train the market to scroll past your listing. By day 60, buyers start wondering what's wrong with it, why no one else has bought it, what do they know that I don't? The listing goes stale. And when you finally drop the price, you're not just competing with fresh listings anymore. You're competing with the perception that something is fundamentally broken about your property. One seller I worked with was emotionally attached to a number. The house had been their dream property, and they genuinely believed it was worth what they were asking. But after 90 days of silence, we had a very hard conversation. I showed them once again what the data was saying, and comps, days on market, buyer feedback. The market had already spoken. They just hadn't wanted to hear it yet. When we finally adjusted the price, the house sold in 11 days. But by then, they'd lost 3 months of carrying costs, 3 months of stress, and they ended up netting less than if they'd priced it right from day one. Avoidance almost always costs more in the end, whether that's your health, your finances, your relationships, or your real estate. I learned this the hard way through my own illness. When life stripped everything down, I realized how much energy we waste clinging to what used to be instead of adapting to what actually is. The same principle applies here. Markets shift, circumstances shift. Interest rates change the entire psychology of how buyers think. People are more cautious now. They're thinking harder before they move. And when sellers refuse to adjust to that reality, they pay for it, not just in time, but in actual dollars lost. The market dictates the price and the value, not what we as sellers think it should be worth. And the longer you resist what the market is telling you, the more expensive that resistance becomes. That's just the truth. If you're selling right now, here's what you need to do. Look at days on market. If you're past 30 days and minimal showings and no offers, the market has already told you the price is wrong. Don't wait for 60 or 90 days hoping something will change. It won't. Adjust now. Talk to your agent about what comparable properties are actually selling for, not what they listed for, what they closed for. And if the feedback from the buyers is consistent, overpriced, needs updates, awkward layout, believe it. The market isn't lying to you. Denial is what turns a small adjustment into a major loss. The disconnect in today's Gulf Coast market isn't just between buyers and sellers. It's between what both sides expect and what reality is actually offering. And that gap is leaving properties sitting while everyone waits for the other side to blink first. Buyers in this market have become hyper cautious. Interest rates are higher than they've been in years. Insurance costs on Gulf Coast properties have skyrocketed and are now finally coming back down, but are still higher, and HOA fees keep climbing. So buyers are pickier. They're not not just looking for a house that checks most of the boxes. They're looking for a house that checks every box. They want move-in ready. They want updated kitchens, new appliances, fresh paint, modern finishes. They want the property to feel like a vacation home they can step into immediately without spending another dollar. Meanwhile, sellers are still emotionally anchored to what their neighbor's house sold for in 2021 when the market was on fire and buyers were bidding over asking. They remember when properties sold in 48 hours with multiple offers. They're thinking, my house is nicer than the one down the street that sold for $650,000 2 years ago, so mine should be worth at least that, if not more. But the market has shifted. Buyers aren't in a frenzy anymore. They're cautious. They're calculating. They're waiting for the right deal, and sellers who refuse to accept that shift end up sitting. I've had sellers tell me, we're in no rush. We'll just wait for the right buyer. There's one out there. And sometimes that works. If you've got time and financial cushion, it could work. But often what happens is the market keeps moving without them. Comparable properties sell at the adjusted price. Their listing goes stale. And 6 months later, they're frustrated, exhausted, and wishing they had made the hard decision earlier. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Both sides are making emotional decisions instead of strategic ones. Buyers are letting fear of overpaying or fear of buying at the wrong time keep them from pulling the trigger on properties that actually meet their needs. They're waiting for interest rates to drop, waiting for prices to come down, waiting for the perfect moment that may never come. Meanwhile, they're losing time, losing rental income, losing the opportunity to build equity. Sellers are letting pride and attachment cloud their judgment. They've tied their identity to a number. They're thinking, if I sell for less than I hoped for, it means I failed. But that's not how real estate works. The market doesn't care about your feelings. It doesn't care what you paid for the property or what you think it should be worth. The market is a cold, emotionless force driven by supply, demand, interest rate, and buyer psychology. And when you refuse to accept what the market is telling you, you lose. Markets don't wait for you to feel ready. If you've found a property that meets your needs, that generates the rental income you're looking for, that fits your budget, and that you could see yourself using, make the move. Yes, interest rates are higher than they have been. Yes, prices haven't dropped to 2019 levels. But if you're waiting for both of those things to happen at the same time, you'll be waiting a very long time. The cost of waiting is real. You're losing rental income every month and you don't own the property. You're losing equity that could be building. You're losing time. You're losing so much. If you're a seller, you can't control the market, but you can control your response to it. If your property has been sitting for 60 plus days, the market has already told you the price is wrong. Stop waiting for the unicorn buyer who's going to pay your 2021 price in a 2026 market. Adjust. Make the strategic decision instead of the emotional one. And if you can't bring yourself to accept the current market price, maybe you're not actually ready to sell. That's okay too, but don't let your property sit in limbo while you decide. When I look at the Gulf Coast properties that are selling in days instead of months, the pattern is so clear, it's almost boring. Correct pricing, flawless presentation, and aggressive marketing. And most sellers skip at least 2 of those. Let me show you what I mean. I listed a condo in Orange Beach a few months ago. It wasn't the fanciest unit in the building. It didn't have the highest floor or the best view, but the owner understood the assignment. We priced it right based on comparable sales, not based on what they hoped it was worth. We staged it so it felt like a vacation home instead of someone's cluttered personal space. We brought in a professional photographer who knew how to capture Gulf light. We shot drone footage at the beach and the amenities. We wrote listing copy that spoke to the lifestyle, not just the features. And we pushed it everywhere. MLS, social media, email lists, targeted ads, and out-of-state investors. The result, 3 showings in the first 24 hours, 2 offers by day 3, under contract in 5 days, and the buyer paid asking price because they felt like they were getting exactly what they wanted. Compare that to another property I saw sit for 90 plus days, similar size, similar location, similar price point, but the photos were terrible. Dark, poorly lit, shot on someone's iPhone. The description was generic. The price was $20K too high. The owner refused to stage it or even declutter. It looked like someone was still living there and not living there well. Buyers scrolled right past it online. The few who did show up left within 5 minutes. Eventually, the seller dropped the price twice, and it still didn't move because by then, the listing was stale and buyers assumed something was fundamentally wrong with it. Here's what a lot of sellers don't realize. Buyers are making their decision before they ever step a foot in your property. They're scrolling through listings online and they're making snap judgments based on photos, price, and description. If your listing doesn't stop the scroll, you've already lost. It doesn't matter how beautiful your house is in person if no one ever shows up to see it. And presentation isn't just about making things look pretty. It's about removing every possible objection a buyer might have. It's about showing them the lifestyle they're buying, not just the 4 walls and a roof. The other piece is marketing. You can have the most beautiful listing in the world, but if no one sees it, it doesn't matter. A good agent knows where your buyers are and how to reach them. If you're selling a primary residence to a family relocating to Gulf Shores, your buyers are probably searching the MLS, reading school district reviews, looking at community amenities. You have to meet buyers where they are. If you're getting ready to list a property, do not skip these 3 steps. First, price it right from day one. I know it's tempting to list high and see what happens, but all you're doing is training the market to ignore you. Work with an agent who will show you real comparable sales data and be honest about where your property should be priced, and then listen. Second, invest in presentation. Declutter, depersonalize, hire a professional photographer who understands real estate photography on the Gulf Coast. Make sure every room is well lit, clean, and inviting. If you're selling a vacation rental, make it look like a vacation rental, not like your cluttered personal storage unit. And third, make sure your agent has a real marketing plan. Ask them where they plan on promoting your listing. Ask them what makes their approach different from just throwing it on the MLS and hoping, because in this market, hope is not a strategy. But even when sellers do all of that right, there's one more psychological trap that's keeping deals from closing, and it has nothing to do with the house. The biggest thing stopping buyers from pulling the trigger right now, it's the fear of making a decision they'll regret. And that fear is quietly draining their bank account every month they wait. If I had buyers walk through a property, fall in love with it, run the numbers, confirm it meets every single one of their criteria, and then still did not make an offer, why? Because they're terrified of buyer's remorse. They're thinking, what if I buy now and the interest rate drops next year? What if I don't negotiate hard enough and later find out I could have gotten a better deal? Everyone talks about real estate deals, and I want to feel like I got a killer deal, not like I got taken advantage of. So they wait, they keep looking, they keep refreshing Zillow, they keep running the same numbers, hoping something will magically change. Meanwhile, the property they love gets snatched up by someone who was willing to make a decision, and then they're back to square one, frustrated, kicking themselves for hesitating. There's no such thing as a perfect deal. There's no moment where every single variable aligns perfectly and you have zero doubt. Real estate doesn't work that way. Life doesn't work that way. And if you're waiting for absolute certainty before you move, you'll be waiting forever. Every month you delay buying, you're losing over $3,000 in rental income you could have been collecting. You're losing equity that could have been building. You're losing time in a market where vacation rental demand is still strong. Yes, interest rates are higher than they were a few years ago. Yes, prices haven't dropped to 2019 levels. But if you're sitting on the sidelines waiting for both of those things to happen at the same time, you're paying an opportunity cost that's very real. You're losing money every single month. You don't own the property. And here's the other piece. Fear of regret is often just fear dressed up as logic. When you dig deeper, it's not really about the numbers. It's about identity. It's about not wanting to be the person who bought at the wrong time or paid too much. But the fear is based on a comparison game that will never end. There will always be someone who got a better deal. There will always be a moment in the past where prices were lower or rates were better. You can't live your life comparing your decisions to an imaginary perfect scenario that really doesn't exist. If you're a buyer who keeps hesitating, here's what I want you to do. Run the numbers one more time, but this time include the cost of waiting. Calculate how much rental income you're losing every month. Calculate how much equity you could be building. Factor in the reality that the interest rates might not drop significantly anytime soon and prices may not come down. Then ask yourself, is fear of making a wrong decision worth the very real cost of not making any decision at all? And work with an agent who understands that this decision is emotional, not just logical. You need someone who is going to be honest with you about the property, who's going to protect you from actual bad deals, but who's also going to help you see when fear is keeping you from a good opportunity. Because I genuinely care about helping people avoid preventable pain. And I don't want you looking back 5 years from now and realize that fear cost you more than any imperfect deal ever could have. The most valuable thing I do for sellers isn't marketing their property or negotiating offers. It's telling them the truth they don't want to hear before it's too late. Because that conversation is the difference between a small adjustment and a financial disaster. I had a seller last year who wanted to list their Gulf Shores property at a price that was $75,000 over market. They had emotional reasons. They'd put a lot of money into renovations. The house meant a lot to them. They felt like it was worth more than the comps showed. I sat down with them and showed them the data. I showed them what similar properties were actually selling for, not listing for. I showed them the feedback from buyers on overpriced listings. I explained what happens when a property sits too long. And I told them the hard truth. If you list at this price, you're going to sit for months. And when you finally drop the price, you're going to net less than if we priced it correctly today. They didn't want to hear it. They wanted an agent who would believe in the property and fight for the price they deserved. So they listed with someone else at the price they wanted. 6 months later, after 2 price drops and 0 offers, they came back. We repriced the property at what I'd originally suggested. It sold in 3 weeks. But by then, they'd lost 6 months of mortgage payments, 6 months of HOA fees, 6 months of insurance, 6 months of stress. They ended up netting significantly less than if they'd listened to the hard truth on day one. That's the conversation I don't enjoy having, but it's the one that matters most because my job isn't to make you feel good. My job is to protect you from making decisions you'll regret. Here's what I've learned from walking through my own life-altering experience. Avoidance doesn't make problems smaller. It makes them more expensive. Whether that's ignoring warning signs in your health, putting off hard financial decisions, or refusing to accept what the real estate market is telling you, delay almost always costs more than facing reality up front. The sellers who do best in this market are the ones who are willing to make strategic decisions instead of emotional ones. They're the ones who can separate their identity from a number. They're the ones who understand that the market doesn't care about their feelings or their attachment to what used to be. They're the ones who are willing to adapt. And honestly, I think that's a life skill that goes way beyond real estate. Markets shift. Life shifts, circumstances shift. You have to be willing to let go of what was in order to move toward what's next. Sometimes the best decision you can make is to let go of the price you hoped for and accept the reality of what the market is offering today. If you're working with an agent right now, ask yourself, are they telling you what you want to hear or are they telling you the truth? Because a good agent will show you the data, walk through the comparable sales, skills and give you an honest assessment even when it's uncomfortable. You deserve someone who cares more about your outcome than their commission. And you deserve someone who's walked through enough in their own life to understand that real estate decisions are about so much more than square footage and pricing. They're about fresh starts, new chapters, security, dreams, all of it. And that's what I bring to every conversation. I think real estate mirrors life a lot more than people realize. Sometimes people stay in houses too long because they're afraid of change. Some sellers price too high because emotionally they're not ready to let go. And sometimes a house sitting isn't really a marketing issue. It's a resistance to reality from the seller. When I work with people, I see a lot of that underneath the surface. I see the fear, the hesitation, the attachment, the dreams, the grief, the hope. I bring strategy, marketing knowledge, negotiation skill, and local expertise, but I also bring perspective, compassion, and a genuine desire to help people create the life they love. If that resonates with you, I'd love to walk through this with you. If you're serious about buying or selling on the Gulf Coast and you want someone who's going to tell you the truth, protect you from costly mistakes, and help you make decisions you won't regret, let's talk. I'd love to help you create the life you love here on the Gulf Coast.